I'm very honored to welcome Lori Idlout to our caucus. It is a great pleasure. One of Canada's greatest constituency MPs.
Whether or not there's a majority government is fundamentally a decision of the Canadian people at the ballot box. And it should happen that way, not through backroom deals cut behind closed doors in Ottawa.
Reaction there to yet another floor crossing after Nunavut MP Lori Idlout left the NDP for the Liberals. What do these recent floor crossings tell us about the Liberal strategy right now? And does it add pressure on the NDP at a time when the party is trying to rebuild and choose a new leader? Let's bring in our Sunday Scrum. Charelle Evelyn is the managing editor of the Hill Times. She's in Ottawa. Ryan Tumilty is a Toronto Star political reporter. He's also in Ottawa. And Jason Markusoff is a producer and writer for CBC News, and he is in Calgary. Good to see everyone. This now feels like it was 2 weeks ago, but it was just last week that this happened. It is surprising, the number and speed at which this is happening. What does it tell you, Charelle, about either Mark Carney's appeal or what the Liberals' strategy is in trying to attract people over?
I've been thinking about that's a hard question to answer because from everything that we've been seeing with Mark Carney, I'm not sure we can specifically nail down what it is about him if it's about him specifically, it's about the kind of the broader geopolitical context that he has found himself in. Is it his politics? All of these things. I mean, maybe it's all of the above. Yeah. But the fact that he is attracting people from the Conservative Party, people from the Democrats, probably people who would fill the Green space, to his side at the time when and it is clearly working because the polling is all in his favor. He has actually grown the Liberal Party's advantage when you're looking at polling numbers since a year ago when he first became Prime Minister. But all of these things have to point to, is the public ready for change? And I think the answer is no. And that is what is, I think, potentially driving some of this. Yes, there are some moves that have to be made in terms of counteracting the United States, broadening Canada's outreach to foreign governments and countries and partners. But at the same time, everybody is nervous still, I think, about what is going on outside of our borders. Yeah. So the fact that you have somebody who seems to be a relatively stable figure is drawing that people wanting to join and sit at that, find that safe harbor at a time when the waters are so rocky everywhere else.
Yeah, Ryan, it is, sure, I'm sure there's some opportunism involved for all MPs. I mean, I'm not that naive, but I also, it does feel like, to Charelle's point, that there's also a desire to sort of help. And for some people, they think they can be more effective if they're on the government side than in the opposition side, which, Pierre Poilievre would obviously have a different take, but it feels like that's part of what's motivating people here.
I think that's probably part of it. I think, of the 4 floor crossers, there's probably a dozen different reasons why people crossed. Yeah. Some of them were probably thinking about their own careers and how long they have and how it might be better to sit on the government bench for once. I think some of them are definitely thinking that they can do more for their constituents. I'm sure that's part of what Lori Idlout considered, that she can do more for her constituents, especially in the North, on the government benches. But I think these people are making their own calculations, and I think they're also reading the public mood. No one is excited about an election. Mm-hmm. No one is excited, and people are genuinely excited about Mark Carney, it seems, from the polling that we've seen. He's doing numbers that are better than a Liberal Party has done in years. A poll in the Toronto Star that we ran about yesterday shows that the first time people are ready to re-elect the Liberals. They're not talking about time to change. That's a big change for Canadian public sentiment.
Yeah, it is. And they don't seem to be moving. And I guess, that is what everyone is counting on, is that over time things will start to erode. But right now it is the polls are not suggesting that so far. Anyway, Jason, give me your take from out west about what you make of this continuing to happen, because there's also plenty of rumors that it's not over yet.
No, I remember a few weeks ago, and you were there too, Rosie, at the at the Conservative convention in Calgary, everybody seemed to be kind of looking around. Like, they were not worried that Pierre Poilievre was going to lose, but they were worried Pierre Poilievre was going to lose more members. Of course, it happened with Matt Genereux, the Edmonton MP, and I don't know if they're completely confident that it's done, even as the math edges Mark Carney toward a majority. What's especially challenging now that you have people from both sides coming over, that it not only does taking members from those caucuses weaken those own caucuses, but it also weakens the ability for, say, the Conservatives, if it was only NDPers crossing over, to say he's lurching the country to the left, we're lurching the party to the left, we can claim. Same thing with the NDP. And of course, this is not the only new Democrat, prominent new Democrat who's come over. One of the candidates in Scarborough is a former Ontario NDP deputy leader just until now. So the broad appeal, and of course the appeal isn't only broad politically, it's also geographically, and that's what's going to be troubling a lot of the opposition members. In Alberta, the party's up. In Quebec, the party's up. The party's doing very well in British Columbia and Atlantic Canada, and of course the big province Ontario. So all of this suggests that this is why also we're probably not seeing a lot of anger in the community for Carney to pick up floor crossers or kind of lurch toward a majority through floor crossing and by-elections. Normally that might not be popular, but since the government itself is popular, people are willing to forgive that.
So, Charelle, talk to me about what it means for the NDP. You know, already no official party status, looking for a new leader. That's going to happen towards the end of the month. Trying to create any kind of momentum, which, you know, certainly the fundraising numbers are up and membership is not bad. But this kind of thing right now is a blow, I would imagine. And I don't know how they move forward now. They're down one more, and they could lose Alexandre Boulris still.
Yeah, absolutely. It's when you're looking at the specifics of MP Idlout's crossing, it is hard to draw, a linear line saying that this is a reflection on the NDP race specifically, just because she has the northern context where it's a lot less partisan. But overall, it does. The optics are still bad. That here's somebody who was thinking about staying to help with the rebuild of the party, decided that she has a better opportunity to get things done for her constituents by being part of the government's table. And so whoever is going to end up leading the NDP has a very tall order to fill, because how then do you generate momentum, generate excitement when you can't even get it from the people who are already carrying the party's banner, who are already elected members of the House? And you want to be seen as generating that momentum that carries over into outside, into the actual voters, people who are going to want the NDP there to demand more of the government. Because when the government is occupying the center, and now you could say center-right space, without that pushback from the left, you are going to weaken the Conservatives, and you're going to allow the Liberals to kind of do what they want to a degree. So how do you look at what Carney is missing? What areas and aspects of governance, of policy is he not filling? And add an actual strong voice and advocacy for that, without looking like you're just kind of fiddling around the edges while the so-called adults are talking.
And Ryan, in terms of the by-elections too, I mean, that's what would get the Liberals over the line, unless someone else crosses the floor, I suppose. I do wonder how that sort of plays in. I mean, I know the two Toronto ones will probably stay Liberal, but if you're in the midst of a by-election, is that something that goes through your head as well as you're making a decision on how to vote?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Toronto by-elections are all but in the Liberals' camp. I mean, those ridings, the Liberals won with almost 30% of the vote last time, so it would be a real earthquake if they lost those two. Yeah. I think now all eyes are on Terrebonne, though, because that would get the Liberals to 173, and that is a substantially different majority than 172. 172 survives a confidence vote. Sure, 173 can push a government agenda through very, very quickly if they so choose. And so I'm sure that's going through people's minds of, are we about to be living in a Liberal majority regardless? And maybe it's time to get on the bandwagon. But I think it's going to be something people are going to be watching for sure.
We've lost jobs. We've also created jobs. We have taken steps immediately to help Canadians in terms of the tax cut for 22 million Canadians. That's starting to take effect now.
We would stand firm on unfair trade practices with our North American partners against China for maximum leverage in the CUSMA negotiations, and we will get rid of the entire EV mandate.
The Prime Minister first there responding to questions about the latest jobs report, and Pierre Poilievre just moments ago as he continues his trip to the United States to talk up Canada. The pressures on the economy are certainly being felt in the job market. So how much does it tell us about how the Carney government is doing, and what is Pierre Poilievre hoping to do on his trip? Let's bring everyone back for our Sunday Scrum. Charelle Evelyn, managing editor of the Hill Times in Ottawa, Ryan Tumilty, Toronto Star political reporter, and Jason Markusoff, a producer and writer for CBC, and he's in Calgary. Good to see everyone again. I'm kind of lumping these two together, but I'm telling myself they're related in some ways because, the Prime Minister is talking about defending performance on the economy and talking about how it's related to the United States, and Pierre Poilievre is in the United States. But let's start with the Prime Minister, Jason. We did lose 80,000 jobs compared to the U.S., and that's not great news for this government at this time. He says that, over time, we had gained some jobs, and now this is just a net loss for this past month. What does it tell you about the government's strategy and the impact this country is feeling because of Donald Trump?
This is a really, really bad jobs report. I mean, the economists are expecting Canada to gain 10,000 jobs, not lose 87,000 jobs month to month. So that is harsh. It could create a situation where the Bank of Canada has to, instead of raising interest rates to meet the prevent inflation because of oil prices rising, make them lower them to stoke the economy, which could spiral further inflation, the sort of inflation that for those who are employed and those who are not employed is going to really hurt. I mean, now, this also politically for Mark Carney threatens to sort of unravel perception. People are having a very beneficial perception people are having. The latest Abacus poll that Ryan referred to last hour says that 42% of Canadians think that their country's on the right direction, only 43% on the wrong direction. Contrast that with the world. 12% right direction, 79% wrong track. And in the U.S., Canadians think U.S. is 13% right direction, 79% wrong track. So we think that, Carney has been able to create this perception in Canada that we are this sort of shining beacon of hope that he is keeping things on track with his defense spending, infrastructure project. But, with more bad news like this, that creates not only a, problem for Canadians seeing things are losing, but also an opening for people like Poilievre to propose other options and saying what he's doing is not working.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's what Poilievre is hoping for. Mr. Poilievre is hoping for that over time, those things just get more challenging. I should say that the Prime Minister said that compared to the U.S., Canada's doing okay. He said the U.S. gained 6,000 jobs. Actually, the U.S. lost 6,000 jobs. So normally he'd be on the numbers better than I would, but he's traveling a lot. So I don't know. Ryan, what do you make of that jobs report and whether the idea that the U.S. is doing worse is in any way kind of reassuring to Canadians as they look at that?
I can't imagine it's at all reassuring to unemployed Canadians.
Yeah.
We've talked obviously about the Prime Minister's poll numbers, and they are strong, and he's doing very well politically, attracting all the floor crossers. But Canadians are going to shift if the economy is not doing well for them. Yeah. And I know of no government, no party that ever does well in a bad economy. So he definitely has to be concerned about that. I think everything that this Prime Minister has done, almost everything I should say, is about long-term economic growth. It's about big projects that will happen over years and changing our trade policy over years. So certainly a majority helps him get to some of those good news, but in the short term, there might be a fair more bit of bad news, and I think that's going to be a problem for the Prime Minister.
Charelle?
Yeah, there's that element of that, what have you done for me lately? That always comes back to bite politicians. Yeah. And as much as Mark Carney may not cast himself as one, he is now a politician, and that is something that he will have to think about. Because as Ryan said, these are long-term initiatives, and people are going to be looking for immediate relief. Yes, the Prime Minister can point to certain things. C4 became law last week, so that enshrines things like that income tax cut, GST rebate for some first-time home buyers if you could afford a home that's at least $1 million. it codifies getting rid of the consumer carbon price. So those types of things. But to reference again, go back to some of the recent Abacus numbers, what they found is that, yes, the political momentum for the prime minister is growing, but the economic kind of skepticism and the mood about the economy is also dropping. And in that space, right now you have the economy and affordability at number one, and then worries about Donald Trump as number two. And when it comes to economy and affordability, the Conservatives still hold that space as where people, the margin is narrowing, but people still see them as potentially better stewards of the economy. And that is not something that the prime minister has managed to take away from the Conservatives. So the fact that you have Pierre Poilievre going out talking about what his plan would be, getting relaying or seeming to relay that he has some buy-in from people in the industry as to how we could potentially make their lives better for an industry that is being hurt really badly right now by the tariffs. That is all something that the prime minister has to take into account.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the trip. It doesn't have to be about the auto strategy in particular, but Charelle's right. The Conservatives say they worked pretty closely with Unifor to come up with some ideas, and the ideas seem to be predicated on the idea that the biggest and best market for Canadian cars is the United States, and that has to be resolved. Otherwise, there's no point in having an auto sector at all. This trip, though, comes, Jason, as I was saying to Mr. Seaback, after a number of years where Pierre Poilievre did not really pay any attention to the United States, certainly didn't talk about Donald Trump until very recently. And I do think it begs the question whether it's too little, too late, this trip that he's doing, that he has told the Prime Minister about, by the way, and apparently has his support to go down and do it.
It's like that old adage: the best time to plant a tree is yesterday. The second best time is right now. So, better to do it now than not do it at all because it was too much later. I think that what Poilievre is doing, and this is a really interesting news conference, not only because of how much union involvement he had, which I'm sure makes the New Democrats and Liberals alike gulp a lot, but also that he's trying to link the economy and affordability with trade policy. He knows that trade policy is where a very pressing issue and concern for Canadians, and they see Carney doing very well, and it's kind of eating Carney's lunch on it, or leaving Poilievre's lunch on this, and he's trying to put forward ideas. And it's I think a lot of people might, think him a bit of a charlatan for trying to propose that that we can get tariff-free deal. Right. But I think he's selling people on hope. And I think that certainly in the auto sector, in that Southern Ontario, Southwestern Ontario, they are hoping for a much better thing. They don't want to try to give up, see this existential threat and, impossible dread that Trump is trying to wreak on their sector. So he's trying to do that. And I can imagine when Poilievre is down in Texas later on this trip, he'll do the same thing with energy as well.
Only have about a minute left, Ryan.
It's worth a shot. I think Mr. Poilievre has a political issue that Canadians are more concerned, than when he first became leader about what's happening on the world stage, and they're going to be paying attention, and they're going to be looking for a prime minister who can represent us on the world stage, whether it be about trade issues or wars, which we have both of in spades right now. But I don't know that there is a tariff-free approach to selling cars to Canada anymore. I think that might be off the table. It's tragedy. It has done as well for 50 years, but it might not be there anymore, sadly.
Yeah. Last 30 to you, Charelle.
Look, everybody's having an issue trying to get a deal with Donald Trump, and everybody is going to be throwing whatever they can at the wall to see what sticks. I don't know if we're going to see the president move from whatever it is that he wants to do, which is win as much as possible. But it is good to see people at least trying to find a way through.
Charelle Evelyn, Ryan Tumilty, Jason Markusoff, thank you for spending part of your Sundays with me. I hope you go and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks.